The minute you're a rapper, the minute you're a performer, you're no longer a damn gangster.
This is the home of Danny Trejo, the man with the scarred face and gravelly voice, yet loved by millions of fans around the world. But few people know that behind his gentle smile and those iconic roles lies a past so dark it's almost unbelievable. From a young age, he was already addicted to drugs. And before he even turned 20, Danny Trejo had become a name that struck fear throughout the entire California prison system. He was once imprisoned in San Quentin, the facility infamously known as America's Hell, where men with nothing left to lose would gamble their very lives just to survive another day. No one ever believed that a man like that could walk out of there, let alone walk onto the red carpet of Hollywood. Yet from a life once shunned and condemned by society, Danny Trejo rose to become a star with hundreds of roles to his name, celebrated by audiences as one of the most powerful and enduring icons of 20th century cinema. So how did Danny Trejo's transformation from a notorious inmate to a symbol admired across the world truly unfold? And what hidden truths lie within his modest home in Pico Rivera unseen by the public eye? Join us as we uncover the answers in today's video. In 1930, amid the shadow of the Great Depression that loomed over America, a baby boy was born into a poor working-class family in San Francisco. No one could have imagined that the child with the dark eyes and stern face would one day become Hollywood's ultimate symbol of stoic masculinity, Clint Eastwood. His life's journey from hardship to immortality stands as a powerful saga of resilience, endurance, and an unshakable belief in oneself. His father was a steelworker, his mother an accountant, both struggling to make ends meet. While other children were still busy playing, Clint had already stepped into the harsh reality of survival, working at a grocery store, serving as a beach lifeguard, even carrying golf clubs as a caddy for wealthy men in the suburbs. Those long, sun-scorched days forged in him a steely endurance, a stubborn will, and an instinct for survival qualities that would later define both his on-screen characters and his true self. In 1954, at just 10 years old, he was arrested for the first time for stealing a candy bar from a grocery store. That brief arrest opened a door he would never again be able to close. In neighborhoods where the wail of police sirens echoed more often than church bells, being handcuffed wasn't a disgrace, it was a rite of passage. At 12, Danny Trejo injected his first dose of drugs not for pleasure, but to silence the sound of his father's screams inside his head. The high brought a few minutes of peace. But then, the darkness crept in, thick, heavy, and lasting, just like the fear he was trying to escape. "It made me feel like I wasn't afraid of anything anymore," he later said. And when you stop feeling fear, you can do anything. With a fistful of dollars, 1964. For a few dollars more, 1965, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. 1966, Eastwood rose to global stardom. He no longer merely played the cowboy, he became the archetype. A man of few words, cold and detached, yet guided by a moral code that existed beyond the reach of the law. And when Dirty Harry premiered in 1971, Clint Eastwood moved from the legend of the West to the legend of the modern city, embodying the image of a defiant man hardened by life who took justice into his own hands. From that moment, he was no longer just an actor. He became the face of a generation. In the 1970s, Eastwood ventured into filmmaking, founding his own production company, Malpaso Productions. The name Malpaso, meaning bad step, was almost ironic since many thought his decision to direct was a reckless gamble. But within a few short years, the world would realize it was the wisest step he ever took. From the late 1970s to the 1990s, Michael Douglas reached the height of his career. He acted and produced, constantly challenging himself with complex roles, from the charming adventurer in Romancing the Stone 1984 to the ruthless businessman Gordon Gekko in Wall Street 1987, which earned him an Oscar and became a symbol of its time. Movies like Fatal Attraction, Basic Instinct, and The Game portrayed the modern American man strong yet lonely, rational yet vulnerable. In the 21st century, Douglas kept his momentum with Traffic 2000, Wonder Boys 2000, and his role as Hank Pym in Ant-Man 2015, securing his legacy as a timeless Hollywood icon. The Danny Trejo of those years was no longer the trembling boy hiding in a corner of his Echo Park home, but the distorted shadow of that same child, cold, dangerous, and ruthless enough to make anyone afraid. And then the inevitable happened. During a gun-soaked drug deal gone wrong, Danny Trejo was surrounded and captured by police. The sentence came cold final, and his name was transferred to San Quentin State Prison, one of the most notorious penitentiaries in the United States, reserved only for those society had already declared beyond redemption. When the iron door slammed shut behind him, the sound was like the lid closing on his youth's coffin. Yet he didn't know then that within that darkness, his life was about to truly begin the darkest, but also the most defining chapter that would shape the man he would become. San Quentin Prison sits not far from the San Francisco Bay, surrounded by moss-covered walls and barbed wire so cold it could slice through skin. From a distance, it looked like a fortress of shadows, a place where time had stopped, and sunlight was nothing more than a forgotten luxury. Inside, honor meant nothing. The law was a joke, and trust could get you killed faster than a knife. In San Quentin, men were no longer men. They were divided into gangs, into colors, into fragments of where they came from, and every glance could ignite a bloodbath. Danny survived that place by instinct, like a wild animal, always alert, always ready to strike first to stay alive. But amid the hatred-choked air of the prison, he found one narrow path to salvation boxing. In a cramped training yard under the blistering California sun, the boxing matches were one of the few places where men could release their rage without punishment. There, the sound of gloves striking flesh echoed like the heartbeat of survival itself. Danny quickly began to stand out. With his lean, muscular build, sharp punches, and fearless eyes, other inmates started calling him the Animal, the undefeated Wild One. Through boxing, Danny earned his place in San Quentin, no longer hunted but respected. Once, he knocked out an opponent within just a few rounds, and the entire prison yard erupted in cheers. For a brief moment, he felt he was no longer a criminal, but a human being. But that light didn't last. The rage and defiance ingrained in him for years dragged Danny down once again. A violent gang brawl landed him in solitary confinement, a cell barely 3 square meters wide with no window, only a narrow slit through which light fell like a thin blade. The air was thick with the stench of mold and rust, and time itself seemed frozen. In that place, day and night blended into one. Only the echo of the guard's footsteps broke the silence, steady, cold, unfeeling. Danny couldn't remember how long he stayed there, but it was in that emptiness that he first heard the sound of his own voice, hoarse and weak. "I'm tired." And from that single moment, the idea of change began to flicker inside a man who once believed he had nothing left to lose. The turning point came when Danny met an older inmate who had once joined a 12-step recovery program. The man didn't say much, he simply handed Danny a crumpled piece of paper with a scrawled message. "You can't change your past, but you can choose who you'll be starting tomorrow." No one knew why that one sentence struck Danny, a man who had survived on fists and fury, but it stopped him in his tracks. For the first time in years, he didn't want to fight anyone, didn't want to prove anything. He just wanted to understand himself. From that day on, Danny began attending Cocaine Anonymous meetings inside the prison. At first, it was just an excuse to skip work duty. But over time, the raw confessions of broken men silenced him. "I used to be a monster, and I'm trying to start over." That single sentence echoed in his mind for countless nights. For the first time in his life, Danny Trejo sat still, without reacting, without blaming, just listening. As time went on, Danny gradually became a recovery program mentor inside the prison. He taught boxing to younger inmates, encouraged them to stay away from drugs to control their anger, and to survive without having to spill blood. When he was finally released, Danny continued that same work in Los Angeles, not realizing that this simple act would become the fateful key that opened the door for a former convict to step straight into Hollywood. In 1985, now in his 40s, Danny Trejo still had no real concept of a steady career. He worked odd jobs across L.A. construction helper driver, sometimes a night guard at warehouses in the San Fernando Valley. Every morning he made coffee in his small kitchen, walked his dog around the block, and returned to long, exhausting shifts that lasted until nightfall. On the surface, his life seemed ordinary, but beneath it, it was still a long, quiet struggle of a man trying to stay out of the shadow of his past. Danny spent most evenings at Cocaine Anonymous meetings, a 12-step program helping addicts fight their cravings. He didn't just attend, he stayed afterward to talk with newcomers, to listen to, remind them not to give up. The turning point came on a night no one could have predicted. He received a call from a friend in his recovery group, his voice trembling with panic. "I'm about to relapse, Danny. I can't handle the pressure on set." Without hesitation, Danny started his car and drove off into the night, unaware that this drive would change his entire life. The film set that night was for Runaway Train, an action movie directed by Russian filmmaker Andrei Konchalovsky, starring Jon Voight and Eric Roberts. As Danny stepped past the security fence, the floodlights glinted across his weathered face, the tattoos on his arms barely visible beneath his worn-out shirt. In a world filled with cameras, props, and famous people, Danny looked completely out of place, and in truth, he was. He had come only to help a friend stay clean, never imagining that fate was waiting for him right there among strangers. While talking, Danny unexpectedly ran into Edward Bunker, the film's screenwriter, a familiar face from the boxing yard back in San Quentin. The handshake between two former inmates lasted barely 10 seconds, but it was enough for Bunker to recognize the same fierce survivor's gaze in the man before him. When he heard the crew needed someone to train Eric Roberts in boxing, Bunker didn't hesitate. He pointed straight at Danny. "This guy's the real deal. Let him teach him how to fight." Danny agreed to help. He thought he'd just show a few punches, a few dodges, and leave. But when he stepped into the frame, what stunned everyone on set wasn't his technique, it was his authenticity. The way he moved, the cold focus in his eyes, the breath of someone who had once fought to survive. Director Konchalovsky watched him for a long moment and said quietly, "He doesn't need to act. He is the character." And so, in the middle of a Hollywood film set, the ex-convict once sentenced to San Quentin was given the very first role of his life, a prisoner without lines, without a name on the poster. But when Runaway Train premiered, audiences were immediately drawn to that face-sharp, fierce weathered, as if every scar was telling its own story. No one knew who he was, only that his presence felt so real, it was almost terrifying. From that nameless role, the man who had once survived San Quentin officially stepped into Hollywood not by luck, but by the raw truth written across a face no acting school could ever replicate. By the late 1980s, Danny Trejo was appearing in a string of action films including Death Wish 4, The Crackdown 1987, Lock-Up 1989 with Sylvester Stallone, and Marked for Death 1990 alongside Steven Seagal. In nearly all of them, he played tough, gritty characters, ex-cons, gang enforcers, or silent bodyguards lurking in the shadows. Though his parts were small, audiences couldn't look away. The scarred face, the cold, cutting stare, the gravelly voice that seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime behind it. No acting class could teach that, because it was all real, carved from the years he had lived. In an interview, Danny once said, "I never learned how to act." When the director says, "Look angry," I just remember what it felt like in prison. A short sentence without pride or embellishment, just the truth of a man who had walked out of hell. By the early 2000s, Danny Trejo had become a familiar face in American action cinema. He wasn't a box office star, but he was a symbol, the kind of character actor audiences recognized instantly, even if they couldn't recall his name. Major directors like Michael Mann, Robert Rodriguez, and Tony Scott all worked with him, and they all described him with the same phrase, a professional survivor, someone who had endured more than most, both on-screen and off. The real breakthrough came in 2010 when director Robert Rodriguez, who had previously worked with Danny on Desperado and From Dusk Till Dawn, decided to create a character directly inspired by him. The film was Machete, developed from a fake trailer in Grindhouse. Rodriguez knew one thing for sure: only one man could embody Machete, a face both menacing and warm, marked by sin, yet defined by redemption. When Machete premiered, Danny Trejo captured Hollywood's full attention. His character wasn't a cape-wearing superhero or a savior of the world, but a man scarred by his past, who still fought for justice in his own brutal way. In an era when heroes felt distant and artificial, Danny made people believe again because he was real. He knew what it meant to be broken and what it took to rise. "I wasn't playing Machete," he said. "I was just showing the world a part of me they'd never seen before." The success of Machete far exceeded all expectations. The film grossed over $44 million worldwide, despite its modest budget, transforming Danny Trejo into a bona fide pop culture icon. The image of the long-haired man with tattoos etched across his face and arms holding a machete in his hand became a symbol printed on t-shirts, posters, toys, and even turned into memes across social media. At an age when most actors were retiring, Danny Trejo was reaching the peak of fame, proof that sometimes the distance between prison and legend is just one role. After Machete, Danny Trejo returned for the sequel Machete Kills 2013 and appeared in a string of major projects including Breaking Bad, Sons of Anarchy Predators, and the Spy Kids film series. Though he never received Hollywood's biggest honors like the Oscars or Golden Globes, his name remained beloved by millions. Danny Trejo's power didn't come from awards. It came from his story, a man who fell to the very bottom and climbed back up with his own hands. Every character he played carried the pulse of real life. To audiences, Danny Trejo wasn't just Machete. He was a living emblem of survival redemption and the belief that everyone deserves a second chance. Fame can intoxicate many, but for Danny Trejo it was just a temporary light. While most stars chose endless parties and the glow of Beverly Hills, he went the opposite way. The man who once terrified America didn't live behind gates or under spotlights. He lived in a small house in Pico Rivera, a humble working-class neighborhood in the heart of Los Angeles. Danny Trejo's home sits quietly behind an old iron gate and a line of leafy trees. There are no guards or high-tech security systems, only the sound of dogs barking from the backyard and the wind brushing through the porch. From the outside, the house is so modest that most people would drive past without ever guessing its owner had appeared in more than 400 films. The single-story house spans about 1,400 square feet and is valued at roughly $600,000, a modest sum by Los Angeles standards. A faded red brick path leads to the front porch where a wooden door opens to a warm, peaceful space that feels more like a home than the residence of a movie star. Inside, wooden floors stretch across the living room where family photos, pictures from his San Quentin boxing days, and snapshots with friends from the neighborhood fill the walls. But the Mission Ranch restaurant is more than a place to dine. It is the heart of the Carmel community. It regularly hosts weddings, charity fundraisers, and intimate gatherings of Eastwood's close friends, from fellow actors and directors to veterans he once served alongside in the military. Despite being owned by a Hollywood legend, there is no trace of ostentation. Staff members often recall that Eastwood forbade hanging photos of himself anywhere on the property and refused all guided tours, insisting this is a home, not a museum. Today, the Mission Ranch remains an essential stop for anyone visiting Carmel. Yet for those who truly understand, it is more than a restaurant. It is an extension of Clint Eastwood's soul, a place where he preserved the essence of the West, quiet, free, and unyielding against time. Now, in his twilight years, Eastwood chooses to live in seclusion at Mission Ranch, far from scandal's noise and the blinding glow of fame. The main bedroom is strikingly simple: a medium-sized bed with white sheets, an old alarm clock, and a wooden crucifix hanging quietly on the wall. Behind the house lies a garden spanning more than 600 square meters where Danny grows tomatoes, jalapenos, cilantro, and onions, ingredients used in his own restaurant chain. In one corner of the yard sits a metal folding table under a green canvas canopy, surrounded by a few mismatched plastic chairs. It's not fancy, but it's where he welcomes friends, neighbors, and even former inmates whose lives he once helped turn around. Each gathering is simple: grilled meat, strong coffee, and old stories, sometimes ending in laughter, sometimes in long, thoughtful silence. His neighbors all know who he is, but no one calls him a star. To them, Danny is just the man who brings pastries and food to the local kids, who shakes hands with everyone and asks how they're doing, genuinely, not out of habit. Life in Pico Rivera moves simply but steadily. Every morning, Danny wakes at 5, brews coffee, feeds his dogs, and takes a walk around the neighborhood. He greets people one by one, cracks a few jokes, then returns home to sit on the porch and read the paper. Around noon, he often stops by one of his Trejo Tacos locations, sharing a meal with employees like old friends, no one daring to call him the boss. In the afternoon, he tends the garden cook's dinner or rewatches old boxing matches. When film offers come his way, he still accepts them, though he no longer chases the relentless schedules of the past. In every sense, the house in Pico Rivera is more than just a home. It's a symbol of a journey. After 13 years in prison, hundreds of film roles, and thousands of days of sobriety, this is the reward Danny chose to keep for himself: a place of peace, free from excess, untouched by flashing lights, existing only to remind him how far he's come. If Hollywood was where Danny Trejo was reborn, then Pico Rivera is where he finally gets to live as himself. Among the old walls, faded photographs, and the morning scent of coffee, perhaps Danny Trejo has never felt richer. Though he chooses a modest life, Danny still holds on to one lifelong passion: cars. Not the sleek supercars or luxury SUVs that fill Hollywood driveways, but old time-worn classics that carry the spirit of an era long gone. The first and his most beloved is a 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air, painted glossy black with gleaming chrome trim. Under the California sun, the surface reflects an image of another time, a time of dusty streets, rock and roll pouring from small diners, and a youth that slipped away too fast. The '57 Bel Air isn't the most expensive car in his collection, but it's the one that means the most. Every detail bears his care: red leather seats, a restored V8 engine, and a dashboard preserved in its vintage style. He often drives it on weekends playing Chicano oldies as he cruises down Whittier Boulevard, the same streets where his chaotic childhood once unfolded. When I grab the wheel, he says, "It feels like I'm driving my own life, only this time I know where I'm going." Next to it stands a 1963 Buick Riviera coated in metallic gray with a long, smooth silhouette and the elegant curves that defined 1960s luxury. Danny bought it in the early 2000s after he'd begun earning a steady income from acting. The Riviera represents a different chapter in his life recognition. "I didn't buy it to show off," he said. "I bought it to celebrate the first time I could afford something just because I liked it." Danny keeps the Riviera meticulously maintained, always spotless, though he rarely takes it out on the road. It mostly appears at community events or during Mexican-American lowrider parades across Los Angeles. When driving the Riviera, Danny often rolls the windows down, his hair tied back, sunglasses on his face, calm and content. No longer the outlaw he once was, but a man who has lived through the storm and found peace. The third car in his collection is a 1940 Chevrolet Fleetline painted deep wine red with white-rimmed wheels. This is the car Danny calls the soul of East L.A. He bought it from an elderly mechanic who had spent years restoring it by hand. The Fleetline embodies the spirit of Chicano lowrider culture, a symbol of the Mexican-American community Danny has always identified with. That's why he reserves a special space in his garage for this car alone. While most actors in their 60s choose to slow down, Danny Trejo began a new journey not on a film set but in the kitchen. For him, food was never about luxury. It was the simplest and most honest way to tell his story. The sight of the silver-haired man maneuvering that little car through Carmel's quiet streets never fails to make locals smile, a rare glimpse of innocence within a living legend. Of all the vehicles tied to his film career, the Ford Gran Torino Sport holds the most meaning. It appeared alongside him in Gran Torino 2008, a film about redemption, loneliness, and honor. When production wrapped, Eastwood kept the car as though keeping part of the character's soul, not for display, but to occasionally sit in the driver's seat alone and silent, as if conversing with himself. At the center of the garage gleams a 1966 Ferrari 275 GTB, the crown jewel of his collection, valued at over $1.7 million. Its scarlet body still shines like a mirror, reflecting the face of its aging owner each time he approaches. Eastwood rarely drives it. He simply starts the engine once in a while to hear it roar, a sound he describes as enough to make an old man's heart beat faster than it should. That success led to the opening of Trejo's Coffee and Donuts in 2017, a retro-style cafe filled with the aroma of dark roasted beans and chili chocolate glazed donuts, followed by Trejo's Cantina, a modern Mexican restaurant where he now hosts friends and film crews. Each location carries its own character: graffiti-covered walls, playlists blending hip-hop and Latin funk, and the now iconic logo, a cartoon version of Danny's face glowing in neon above the words Trejo's Tacos. Though each spot has its own style, they all share the same message: even those who once lost their way can still create something good. What truly sets it all apart isn't the food, it's the people. Danny made it his mission to hire those with criminal records, those who had battled addiction, or anyone simply looking for a second chance. "I know what it feels like when no one wants to hire you," he said. "If I can give someone a fresh start, I will." Because of that, many employees across the Trejo's chain are former inmates or recovering addicts who now have steady jobs and affectionately call him the boss who believes. By 2020, Trejo's Tacos had expanded to 8 locations in Los Angeles, employing over 100 people. The brand then reached Las Vegas 2021, Detroit, and even Notting Hill, London 2024. At every grand opening, Danny personally showed up, not for publicity, but to talk with employees, take photos with customers, and thank them for believing in his story. Today, Trejo's has grown into a $10 million culinary, cultural, and community brand featuring its own product line of salsas, coffee, and bottled hot sauces sold nationwide. Yet for Danny, that number isn't what matters most. "I never tried to be a millionaire," he said. "I just wanted to build a place where people who made mistakes could come and feel accepted. And in every taco served and every cup of coffee poured, people taste more than Mexican flavor. They feel a story of redemption, rebirth, and belief in goodness from a man who has lived in both worlds, darkness and light." Having once lived behind bars and in the shadows, Danny Trejo knows too well what it means to be forgotten, to be labeled as someone beyond saving. Perhaps that's why when life gave him a second chance, he chose to repay it by giving back. His journey in charity began in the late 1980s, shortly after landing his first steady acting roles. He returned to the very places that once confined him, rehabilitation centers, youth detention facilities, and local prisons, to share his story with those at rock bottom. Beyond addiction recovery work, Danny serves on the executive board of One Legacy Inspires Hollywood, a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising awareness about organ and tissue donation. He uses his own image to encourage people, especially within the Latin community where organ donation remains a sensitive topic, to become donors and save lives. Since 2010, Danny's charitable efforts have expanded beyond people to include animals and vulnerable communities. He frequently attends pet adoption events, supports spay and neuter campaigns, rescues abandoned animals, and collaborates with organizations such as the Everest Foundation, Best Friends Animal Society Los Angeles Mission, and A New Way of Life to assist the homeless survivors of domestic violence, former inmates, and those in recovery. Beyond financial donations, Danny personally cooks and delivers meals from Trejo's Tacos to free food programs for people in need. Every Thanksgiving, he hosts the Trejo's Thanksgiving Drive at his restaurant, serving thousands of hot meals to the homeless in Echo Park and Pico Rivera. During Christmas, his staff distribute free tacos to those wandering the streets of downtown Los Angeles. Each year, he also donates a portion of his profits to fund rehab centers and halfway houses for ex-prisoners, the same kind of places that once gave him the chance to start over. One of the moments that most powerfully drew public attention to Danny Trejo's compassion happened in August 2019. While driving down a boulevard in Los Angeles, he witnessed an SUV overturn after a collision. Without hesitation, Danny pulled over, ran to the wreck, and rescued a 5-year-old boy trapped in his car seat. Images of him crawling into the upside-down vehicle, carefully cutting the seatbelt, and carrying the child to safety were captured by bystanders. That moment, simple, unscripted, and without any spotlight, became a lasting symbol of who Danny Trejo truly is. A man once lost, now a quiet hero in everyday life. Behind the tough exterior of someone who once survived the prison system, Danny Trejo has always been a man longing for a home, but love for him, much like life itself, has never been easy. Danny Trejo has little to hide. He speaks about himself with an almost brutal honesty, even when it comes to his failures in love. "I've been married 4 times," he once admitted, "and I broke up 4 times not because of them, but because of me." Years of addiction, imprisonment, and uncontrolled anger made it impossible for him to sustain any lasting relationship. His last wife, Debbie Shreve, an actress and real estate agent, stood by him for nearly 2 decades before they separated in 2009. Though his marriages didn't last, Danny found the deepest meaning of love through fatherhood. His eldest son, Danny Boy Trejo, was born in 1981. When he arrived, Danny was still struggling to keep a job and stay sober. During Danny Boy's early years, his father was often absent. "I missed my son's childhood," Trejo admitted. "I wasn't there when he needed me." But in time, the bond between them healed. Danny Boy now works in the culinary field, helping manage parts of Trejo's Tacos, overseeing operations and community programs alongside his father. His second son, Gilbert Trejo, born in 1988, followed his father into the arts but chose to stand behind the camera. Gilbert is an independent filmmaker and screenwriter, best known for From a Son. 2020, a story exploring the complex relationship between a father and son inspired by their own family. Between them exists a rare understanding, 2 men who have both endured hard years but chose to face them through creativity rather than pain. His youngest daughter, Danielle Trejo, born in 1990, is the one Danny speaks of with the softest tone. She pursued the performing arts, working as both an actress and a singer. In many interviews, he has called Danielle the gentle part of his life. "She taught me what it means to love without destroying everything," he said. "When I'm with my daughter, I'm reminded that strength doesn't always have to be loud." Today, Danny Trejo finds peace through his Catholic faith, the most enduring source of strength in a life marked by storms. Every morning, he begins his day with a simple prayer, giving thanks for still being alive and for having another chance to do good. When he's not busy with work or community speaking, Trejo often watches baseball, the sport he loved since childhood, as a way to stay grounded in ordinary life. After everything, he chooses to live simply close to his family, surrounded by his children and grandchildren. In his later years, the man who was once a symbol of raw ferocity now carries the calm of a soul redeemed. For Trejo, happiness is no longer the sound of applause, but quiet afternoons with loved ones, the laughter of children, and the steadfast belief that God never left him. From a boy raised amid screams and syringes to a man sitting quietly on his porch, Danny Trejo has lived through nearly every extreme life can offer. He was once an outcast who slept in cold cells and believed he wouldn't live past 30. Yet somehow he did. And more than that, he turned his life into living proof that people can change and save themselves. Now, in the glittering, illusory world of Hollywood, Danny chooses to step back to live honestly and to hold on to gratitude. His story reminds us that greatness doesn't lie in perfection, but in the courage to make things right and to protect the goodness that remains. If Danny Trejo's story has made you believe a little more in the power of redemption, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so that more people can see that even in darkness, there is always a way back to the light.